Welcome to the Roth Effect. I am Carol Roth, and today I am joined by Dan Granger, who is the founder and CEO of Oxford Road, a leading advertising agency that specializes in audio and all things spoken, aka podcast media, as well as audio tech, media, and technology. He hosts this podcast, Oxford Road Presents Media's New Deal, and we cover a ton of ground, whether you're part of a big business or an entrepreneur. We talk about marketing and the mess that is 2020. We talk about the ease of use concept trumping everything else in today's very overcrowded market. We talk about the if-then shaming fallacy that's going on throughout social media and wider media and what you should do about it. We even talk about Bill Burr and his take on advertising and how it drives certain advertisers up a wall, even though it's incredibly effective. I also want to shout out his amazing charity. He has a charity called Koala Corps that promotes and assists volunteers who work with children who need to be held when they are born prematurely and in the ICU. And it's a really great charity, so definitely want to have you check that out at koalacorps.com. I'll leave that in the show notes. And here we go. Enjoy the show. So Dan, we love having entrepreneurs on the program. And since my audience may not be familiar with you and your background, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be an entrepreneur and the path that led you there?
Absolutely. So I was with Clear Channel Radio for 10 years, which is now iHeart. And during that time, I had an opportunity to really incubate a business. They were a wonderful organization in that they let me test out a million different crazy ideas. And so I had actually built out my own team, and we were really focused on helping brands use a channel as kind of old school as radio to really try to figure out how to measure and expand a program using radio as a customer acquisition channel, because for a long time it had just been thought of as a branding channel, and we look at it like, hey, you buy it for the performance, and then the branding comes free. So we had been incubating a kind of a mini company within the company, and in some of the experiments that we were doing, we were focused on a couple of different things. One was kind of bridging the language barrier that existed between media and tech. And so we took a lot of trips to the Silicon Valley and San Francisco and really tried to help them understand that audio could be used to do things that they had really only thought were possible with digital. And so kind of dialed in that model, worked with a number of different brands from Dollar Shave Club, Dollar Shave was in between when we launched the agency, but LegalZoom.com we put on for the first time in their ever offline campaign. We worked with Reputation.com, Ring Central, a lot of the kind of earlier, what we now call direct brands or direct-to-consumer brands. We started working with them to help them adapt. And then not only was there a great kind of wave that we were able to ride as they really hit critical mass when the Dollar Shave Clubs and the Blue Aprons and everybody started coming into the marketplace. But also there was the podcast revolution. And I had been kind of prodding at that thing since about 2006, trying to get the company interested in it. At the time, that wasn't their top priority. And when I started seeing that some of these podcasters were going on, like, for example, when Adam Carolla joined in 2009, things started getting more interesting. It started looking more like it was going to be a real business. And when they started putting ads in them, I just had to test them. And so, within my employment agreement, I was allowed to refer some of my existing radio clients to advertise in some of these podcasts. And so what our team started doing was just kind of building a loose network of relationships across the ecosystem that might have been, Mark Maron in his garage or somebody using their talent manager. And we just started testing all these shows. What we found out was that there was magic in those shows in terms of their ability to drive performance for marketers. And what do marketers want? Everybody says the same thing. What is the least we can spend to try this thing? And if it works, we'll spend more, we'll grow it. Right. And what happened with podcast was it worked so well that they started scaling like crazy, and brands that nobody had really heard of started coming to us, and it became very, very large very fast. And so the book of business that it took me about 10 years to build, in about 90 days of just doing it as a side hustle, overtook that. So went to the wonderful people that I worked for. I said, guys, I love you, but I'm gonna go out on my own, and I'd like to keep working with the brands that I've brought into the business here. And they were very gracious and said, well, let's partner on this. Let's do it together. And we're not going to give you any grief. So I didn't have to have any kind of Jerry Maguire moment. It was, us all working together. And so we crossed over with a full book of business. I mean, in our first year, it was Hulu, it was Dollar Shave Club, it was Blue Apron, it was ZipRecruiter. A lot of the brands that have become legend in that category were really unknown at the time, and we were able to be a part of that and kind of ride that wave as the D2C revolution took off. Remember when we started in 2013, selling razor blades direct to your door was a novelty. That was a big deal, right? And so that model started to really take off at the same time the podcast ecosystem did too, and we kind of had a foot on both of those as they started to ascend.
Yeah. There's so many lessons already in just that introduction. I just want to underscore a few things. First is the concept of being an intrapreneur, because it sounds like that's really what you were before you were an entrepreneur and took out the financial risk. You did that within the confines of a company, which is often a great model for people to test out and see if they actually like to be an entrepreneur in general. And also, some entrepreneurs do things not for the money, but just because they have a problem they want to solve or something that they want to see executed, and it gives you an opportunity to often start at square 2 or 3 instead of square 0. So I think that's really interesting. And then I also like the fact, that you talked about doing this side hustle first. And I think that that's so important, this proof of concept, and spending the time. And in your case, it was great. You kind of got to do it on somebody else's dime, but getting to the opportunity to test something out before you make that leap, before you invest your own money into it, and you go through all the stress, because obviously being an entrepreneur isn't easy. Doing that side hustle, I think, is so critically important.
Totally agree. And I got a piece of advice from one of the founders of LegalZoom very early on when I was kind of trying to work out what my business model was going to be. We sat down and I told him what I was working on. And I said, look, do you think that I should just be pushing these things now before I really have infrastructure? Or do you think I should kind of build it and then, when I'm quote unquote ready, then start pushing people through the funnel? And what he said was, look, if a man wants to open a fish market, step 1 is to steal 2 fish. And and I think that the word steal, I think, sounds like there are ethical implications, but just to be clear, I don't think he meant it that way. The idea is you have to work with what you have. You have to kind of you have to start acting like what you want to be, rather than getting everything in order, getting all your ducks in a row, which never really happens, and pretending that you're ready. So I think a lot of people never get through the kind of infrastructure phase. And so I think pushing through that fear and just saying, hey, look, I'm going to work with what I've got, and we're going to let the market talk to us. It was really just that we were experimenting, and the market spoke to us, said, we're ready for you now. And we stepped through the door.
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell people that if you have a customer, you can always find something to sell to that customer.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that relationship, that's the most important thing. That's the hard part of the equation. So people spend so much time on, like, here's the product and here's the surface and here's the infrastructure. Forget all this perfect. But at the end of the day, if you have that great customer relationship and you know how to reach that customer, you can always find something to sell them. And I think a lot of small businesses in this crazy time that we're living in have figured that out. I mean, how many businesses have started out doing one thing, and then all of a sudden now we're making masks and PPE and all of these things that have absolutely nothing to do with our business, but you're our customer and we know that you like us, so we're going to find a way to sell something to you.
Well, and I think you're bringing up a very good point. One of the other things, at least from a marketing standpoint, is that, it's like the principle of fire bullets before you fire missiles, right? And I know that if I run a campaign on a podcast like yours, for example, and we look at the numbers on the response afterwards, and we can see that it benchmarks ahead of what they're doing today, we know we've got a winner. And it doesn't matter if you've got a logo picked out or not. The Carol Roth's podcast is going to be a hit, and we need to be a part of that, right? And so that was what we were able to do. We were really able to kind of do all of our focus group, was solved when we had one advertiser test out the Adam Carolla podcast or the, Leo Laporte podcast, and saw that it was good. That was all the data that we needed. Everything else could be figured out later.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So since we're talking about marketing and finding customers, as I talk to small businesses across the country and frankly around the world, and I ask them, what is your biggest challenge? I'm sure it is no surprise to you that it's always finding customers, which is just sort of a fancy way to say marketing. So this is so squarely in your wheelhouse. What advice do you have for the small business owner who says, I'm just struggling finding the customer?
So, first of all, I think that there are a lot of layers to peel back on that onion, because it may be finding the customer when you think it's finding the customer. But if you know that your product is sound, if you know that there's true market demand for what you're doing, and you have a competitive reason for being, if you kind of have settled that in your mind, and you're not just piling into a crowded industry without any type of advantage. So presuming you have crossed over that threshold, I think that one of the key things you can do is really align yourself with content that has influence and is opinion driven. Now, one more disclaimer. Look, everybody's going to go on Google and Facebook first because they are lower barriers to entry. You can list yourself on Google and really control your exposure so that you can turn it on, turn it off, dial it in real time in a way that most channels don't allow you to. But when you start going to channels like TV, radio, podcast, things that are demand generation, when you think about demand generation, it's a different thing because, what is Google? Google is the yellow pages. People are looking for something and they find you going, hey, we're a great option now that you're looking. But when you have something like a podcast, for example, you can actually introduce to people the idea that there is something that can make their lives better that they do not even know they want today, right? And so you're kind of walking into a crowded room of strangers and you're saying, hey, I've got something that's really going to help you guys. Now, did they walk into that room because they wanted to meet you? Probably not. But if I advertise on your podcast, for example, and I'm not walking into a crowd of strangers, I'm walking into a crowd of Carol's friends. And when Carol tells all her friends, hey, I really want you to meet somebody that I know and I've trusted for a long time, I think they can help you, you're in a very different environment. And so the fact that we live in a world where, you don't have to have tens of millions of dollars to align with people that have a tribe that trusts them, and to be able to win their trust and then engage with them so that they will transfer that trust from their relationships back to you. There is real power in that I think most people don't truly appreciate.
Yeah, and I think what it does too is it helps businesses that have that education problem get over that hurdle. As somebody who gives a lot of early stage business advice, you always get somebody who comes to you and says, nothing like this has ever been created before. And they think that that's like a great selling point. And I always go, oy vey, that's not a good thing, because then you're going to spend all your money explaining what it is. And somebody else is going to wait for you to do that and go in and say why they're the better option with their money. And you've seen this on everything, from search. Google's not the first search company. I mean, remember Ask Jeeves and all of the other, searches that we had, Lycos before, in the days before. But they came in, they waited for everyone to educate people about search, and then came in and do it better. And so it sounds to me by having this opportunity, particularly if you're a small company, that you can get over that education hurdle at least a little bit more easily.
Absolutely. And you can get their attention much more easily too, because it's less non sequitur. You go from, an opinion leader sharing their opinion or information about one topic to sharing it about another, and that's one of the reasons. So, cutting my teeth in local radio was a great experience, because I got to work with, real small businesses whose livelihood were dependent on how, one line item succeeded or failed. If they tested a radio campaign and it didn't work, it was going to be very detrimental to their business. So the pressure was high. And one of the things that I really focused on, think this is back 2003 to 2013, I really focused on the spoken word, because a brand marketer, brand advertiser, they may not feel it if, people don't go buy a 6-pack of Coke or whatever. There may not be that awareness of the true sales impact, and there won't be the same damage, and they can afford to buy just for branding purposes alone. So they are the one that you think of first and feel the best about. Most small businesses are operating on much shorter time horizons than that. And so what that means is you need to get their engagement, and you need to get it quickly. And this is certainly a way that you can shortcut it. So one of the things that we always did was really look for spoken word, because it's more lean in, it's more emotional, there's more engagement, and there's more trust. Whereas if you're on a jukebox station and one song comes on that you don't like, you change the station. If you go to commercial break, you change the station to another jukebox, it's going to play another song you like. There's less loyalty inherent in it. Personalities are different. Personalities have that loyalty, so that they are the songs, they are the ads, they are the DJs in between. But even more than that, they are valued for what they think and what they recommend. And so the fact that a brand can kind of skip the line and do that, totally agree with you. And, to what you were saying earlier, one of the golden rules here is don't make them think, right? Don't force them. Ease of use. We think it's about novelty that makes a product attractive. Ease of use wins almost every single time when you're trying to attract a customer. They want to find the path of least resistance. Everybody's too busy. And so if you can attract them with less friction and without them feeling like they had to really, get something that was different than what they signed up for, just in the very nature of how they consumed the media, you've already got a head start.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my personal favorite podcasts and my absolute favorite podcast advertiser readers is Bill Burr. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with Bill Burr. I don't know.
Believe me. Yeah, he's made us all too familiar. The songs he would sing about our clients.
So yes, I want to talk to you about this. So for those who are listening who aren't familiar with Bill Burr, he is a comedian. He's hilarious. He's a comedian that I would like, if that gives you any sense, sort of humor of a 12-year-old boy. And the way that he reads ads is the most ridiculous thing ever. I mean, you mentioned ZipRecruiter. He does this thing where he goes, Zip Recruiter, and then just kind of goes on and on. But like, as you listen to the podcast, like, you look forward to the way that he does this. And like you said, he makes up silly songs. He'll like improvise, like they'll say something and be like, oh, gross, that's disgusting. But it sounds like, from a sort of typical playbook standpoint, it's like, oh, I can't believe he's saying that about our brand. But let me tell you, it works. It's genius. It's actually my favorite part of the podcast. I would imagine from your perspective, as you've sort of already hinted, that it probably drives you crazy. So, how do you let somebody have that personality and add their sort of spiel to the party, so to speak, and introduce you at the party as like, hey, this is my jerk off friend, blah, 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 whatever, where, you may not want to be introduced that way, but everybody who knows him is like, oh, that means he's a great guy. How do you manage through that?
Yeah, what one case study at a time. I mean, I can tell you about, I think back on all the years we've been doing this, and I think about where I get an email that says, Bill Burr, listen to this air check of what he just said for one of our clients. And you listen to it and you go, this is the most insulting thing I've ever heard. Is it funny? Of course it's funny. But are they going to think it's funny? And I have heard him do ads that say virtually nothing even good about the advertiser, and you log into the dashboard and you see that ad actually performed fantastically well. I mean, right. This is a guy that breaks all the rules, and yet it is so salient because of the way that he packages it that I think there's actually an authenticity in his, making what would normally be like ad speak, grotesque and hilarious at the same time, that it does have the impact on the business in a positive way. But it really depends on what kind of organization you're dealing with. And I think the larger the organization, the more they want control, the more they care about optics, the more they go, well, yeah, it's nice that podcast worked, but, tell that to my shareholders. It's like, it depends on which of their friends say what to them first about the ad. Like, it becomes about softer metrics, right? And so I think if you're a small business, you can afford to take those kinds of risks. I mean, look at what's happening in the podcast ecosystem. Look at how dynamic ad insertion has evolved. What does that actually do for the performance marketers who built the place? Does it help us if an ad is limited to 60 seconds? Does it help us if they stick to the script? Does it help us if the host, who everybody's tuning in to listen to, is not reading the ones reading the ad? That actually doesn't help a performance marketer, but what it offers to a brand is something the brands want, which is control and cohesion over their message. And so the way I look at that is, okay, that's the way of the world. And when we work with larger organizations, and we do work with some, very large organizations, they are going to benefit for their goals more so where they have that kind of control and can mitigate that risk, and they can trade some of the performance is the metric, but it's not the only metric. Whereas you're a small business, you're trying to put it together, you're willing to take risks and look the other way on some things that might make you feel uncomfortable, but you know that it's going to help you achieve your goal. It's that kind of thing. You're always going to have a home with the Bill Burr podcast. And so I think it's one of those things that can be a real competitive advantage, because you get to be kind of if you are the first insurance company or whatever that is in that show, you are the chief ambassador on Bill Burr Island, and there's not going to be another one. As long as you're there, you own it. And so the fact that you can kind of have that real estate play, and that you get to have something that your competitors cannot, is a major, major advantage. And I think it's something that spoken word, whether it's radio, podcast, these types of channels where you've really got personalities talking, and that's the content. Those are like the secret weapon of companies that are on the come.
All right. Well, we're going to talk more about words and language and marketing that makes you uncomfortable. But I want to take a quick minute first to talk about our sponsor. As a small business expert and advocate, I know that small business owners and gig workers are sometimes kind of lax when it comes to business banking. Well, Aslo takes all the friction out of business banking, instead of insisting you handle your banking as if the internet never existed. Aslo is a free business checking account with invoicing, bill pay, money transfers, no minimum balance, and no fees. Unlike other banking options, there is no minimum deposit required, you'll never be charged maintenance or overdraft fees, and there is no ridiculous phone system that feels designed to waste your time. Instead of the days or weeks it takes to apply for an account at a traditional bank where you are still required to go in person, with Aslo, you just go to azlo.com and apply in as little as 10 minutes. And there is no waiting to use your account. With Azlo's free instant funding feature, you can deposit up to $1,000 and access it in your account instantly. Azlo is owned by BBVA USA, member FDIC, and because they make business banking easy and offer a fee-free checking account, Money Magazine called them the, quote, best business banking option for freelancers and entrepreneurs, end quote. And since I know, again, that you small business owners and freelancers and gig workers don't always do a great job with separating your business banking, here's an opportunity for you to get started. Sign up right now with no minimum deposit at azlo.com/Roth and get a free copy of Azlo's Small Business Starter Guide, spelled azlo.com/Roth, and sign up with a free Small Business Starter Guide and no minimum deposit. So perfect that we're talking about sponsors here, Dan. And so I'm going to impress upon my audience. You have to make me look good on this podcast with Dan and buy from our sponsor, because otherwise, he's going to say, wow, your metrics didn't perform, and that's on you guys. So anyway, as we're talking about Bill Burr and kind of going off script and controlling messaging, we're in this wild west of 2020 when it comes to marketing and media. And I feel like a lot of things are being rewritten. Rules are being rewritten. So what, from your perspective, has changed, particularly in this year, that you will expect, at least in the short to medium term, will continue?
It's a big question. It's everybody's question. And, the short answer is everything has changed and nothing has changed. I think it is a true both and paradox, because on one hand, you've had two major crises this year that are unlike anything, at least I've seen since I've been in the workforce. And between COVID and the societal unrest following the murder of George Floyd, I mean, these are two game-changing events. And I don't think that society is ever the same. And downstream from that, how do businesses operate? How do we make decisions? How do we market? How do we advertise? Where do we advertise? What do we say when we are advertising? What words do we use? These are all major downstream implications that are definitely heightened today, and I think most likely permanently different.
Let me jump in on that point, because I think it's an important one. When you talk about communication, one of the big challenges that we had even before those two kind of big game-changing events that you talked about is that over, I don't know, the last 5 years, maybe the last 3 in particular, it seems like words have lost meanings. They have dual meanings. People are now offended by almost everything.
Right.
So how do we communicate when we have these new set of completely inflexible rules?
Right. Well, I'm going to say something that is not my typical advice, and nobody really probably wants to hear. But it's the truth, and that is, if you're looking for a rule sheet on this one, it's outdated as soon as you looked at it. And you're going to be signing up to learn a new dance every day, and you will be called out for doing the dance wrong. And so I think there is a part of this where you have to use something that cannot be templatized, and you have to actually look at each situation and slow yourself down, because you have to think and you have to apply your best judgment with the information you have on a day-by-day basis right now. There is no, when COVID came out and brands were trying to figure out, look, there could be a lot of people dying from this. How do we even speak sensitively in this environment? And everybody decided it's that you start by saying, in these unprecedented times, and sounding really sad. That might work for a minute. I think that, listen, if people are experiencing economic hardship, will it help you to offer dig a little deeper to lower the cost of your product. No, I think that's sound strategy, but the world has gotten infinitely more complex even since March. And I think that if we're trying to figure out something that keeps you out of trouble or keeps you from doing everything right, you have to disillusion yourself from the notion that that's even possible. What you have to do is first ask yourself, what's the right thing to do? What do I really think about this? And how does that impact my next decision? So, for example, you look at everybody starting to make statements on Instagram, and then you see the backlash from people on Instagram because either it wasn't enough, it's not enough, it's just it looks like pandering, or you find yourself aligning with an organization that a lot of your customers have a problem with you aligning with. You're going to upset people whether you do nothing, whether you do something, or whether you do the last thing somebody told you to. And so I can't give anybody a clear cut, this is exactly what you must do, except for say, it is time to examine how you've been behaving historically. Ask yourself what change you need to make. Look inside yourself as a person first, and then figure out company policy that aligns with who you want to be and the world you want to live in. And then let your communications be a flow out of the vision that you have for your organization that you're going to stick to, not that you're going to flip in 6 months after the election if the narrative in the country changes. You don't want to be a fair weather friend.
Yeah.
And so I think we all want an easy out. We all want an easy answer. Just show me where the boxes are to check and I'll check them.
Always.
But things are so things are so delicate right now. The country is in a very delicate place, and the market is in a very delicate place. And so if there were ever, best practices and rules for this kind of thing, I think you got to throw them out, because there's no playbook for this one, and the old playbooks are not working like they were. And so I think that you're going to screw it up no matter which way you go, or at least in somebody's mind, even if you feel like you did it right. So you might as well feel good about the path you're going down, and you better be ready to commit for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, that's very wise counsel, and I wanted to ask two sort of follow-ups to that. You talk a lot about asking yourself things. Does it make any sense to have a third party, whether it's an employee advisory board, a consultant advisory board, and a customer advisory board, some group that's maybe a hybrid of all of those, and ask them, hey, this is kind of where we're thinking about going. What may we not be seeing? Because I feel like that's like 90% of the problem, where certainly nothing was intended by whatever company ABC does, but because of their own lack of knowledge, they didn't realize that somebody over there now thinks it meant this, which it obviously didn't. And then obviously it spirals out of control. So does it make sense to bring in third parties, or at the end of the day, is it all about just kind of the path that you want to take?
Well, so I think that, these are questions I'm asking myself. It's questions that I'm talking about, even, with relationships I have in the business community with people that are thinking beyond just their advertising and marketing strategy, right? It's like, who are you as a person? Now, who is your organization? What are you here to do? And what do you really believe in? And I think that I think we all have to take inventory right now. And I think that what you're proposing seems like it probably wouldn't hurt to get some outside perspective. Is that exactly right in every situation? I don't know, because if you bring in an organization to consult with you and they have an agenda that may go beyond the stated agenda or the agenda that you're looking to achieve, not all advice that you follow is going to be the right advice for you. And so there are no silver bullets, but am I thinking about that? You bet I am, because I think you said something earlier that I've been thinking about a lot, which is, I don't know if I know anybody that I could call that would say, yeah, I think I'm superior to other people. I think that I'm above others. I really think that. They might think they've made better decisions than another human being, but very few people are aware if a part of them thinks that they are superior. And I think and yet we keep having, social justice is not new, and it's not fixed, and it's not going away. And I think that what we're trying to do is figure out how do we make it better than it was yesterday, every day, right? And so the thing that I think you're touching on, that I've been really focusing my own mind and organization on, is unconscious bias. It's not that you think you're biased, it's that you may be and you don't even realize it. And how do you provide a framework for people to become aware of their own biases that can harm other people unknowingly, not actively, but it still harms them nonetheless? How do you become aware of that and do it in a way that feels safe enough for the person who's becoming aware, that they don't just feel shamed and judged and, either appease, but really just try to hide or get defensive? People get so defensive with these issues, because you don't want to feel like you're beyond redemption, like you're beyond hope. And so this is very delicate for everybody. But I think what I'm hopeful for in the community that I work in, and in the community that I oversee at my organization, I want us to do better. And I want to be open to perspectives that might be uncomfortable for me to hear, but I want to be searched so that I can make change. But I also want that searching process to not put people on the defensive and make them feel like, say the right thing or you're going to get in trouble, because this should be around growth, right?
Right.
This is around growth. And to have real growth, you need vulnerability, you need trust, and you need time. And, unfortunately, I think everybody wants the quick hit so bad. They want the pain to go away so bad, so fast, that a lot of people are going to skip that and follow, check the boxes that they're being told to check, and never really make any sustainable change.
Yeah, and I think in addition to, what you're talking about with unconscious bias, which is obviously an issue in certain areas, there's also perceived bias where there really isn't a bias, but because it is profitable for somebody else to say it's a bias, or because, like you said, everybody's so sensitive, we've lost all nuance, we've lost all context, we've lost the ability to just communicate with each other, that a lot of times there's a perception of bias. And so it can be helpful for you to know, hey, by the way, here's the issue that's likely to come up, and you can decide whether or not you care. Like, it doesn't mean that just because there is a bias out there that you have to bend to it or deal with it. But as a small business owner, at least if you know that that's going to happen, I think it gives you a better set of information to make decisions from than being caught off guard with that.
Well, I think there's a lot of reality in what you're saying here. One of the challenges is, we can hurt people's feelings. I mean, look at a family structure. Look at what siblings say to each other and do to each other. Listen to those people's stories. Do they love the people that they're doing them to? Yes, but that doesn't mean they didn't hurt their feelings and wound them and keep picking at wounds. and the person that's doing it may not realize that they're doing it, or they may not have meant to do it that one time that set somebody off, but it still set them off. And so I think, the best antidote for anybody, whether you are feeling like you have been offended or whether you have been told that you have offended another, if somebody says, you've harmed me, I want to hear that. I want to really try to consider that, even if I wasn't aware of why it caused that. And I want to try to make accommodations where I can. We don't want to, like, I don't believe in pandering, and I don't like doing things that feel like I'm just jumping on a bandwagon. And so it's really hard for me when it seems like the bandwagon is going in the right direction, but I want to make sure that I'm making this decision in a way that I intend to keep.
Yeah.
Right. But I think to go back to what you were saying, the antidote is humility on both sides. And if you've got somebody who is defensive and says, well, you're calling me out for something that isn't even fair, I think what that does is that invalidates the experience of the person who felt that they were harmed. And the person that was harmed, if they feel like you did that because you're evil and should be shunned, and so I am going to publicly shame you over this. There may not be enough humility in that to say, could this be somebody that I can align with, who actually I can help see other perspectives and help them make a better impact in their community? I think that we don't have a big enough tent, and we don't have enough patience with each other. And this is something that goes to from the top of the government on down to small businesses, where people get stuck in defending themselves. And if everybody's defending themselves, then nobody's listening.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more destruction going on than anything that is constructive. So, staying with that thought for a moment, and this may seem like a crazy question, but I'm not joking around. I actually mean this literally. I'm a planner. I'm somebody who likes to have plans for worst case scenarios.
Oh
So,
yeah.
should every business have a contingency plan if the mob comes for you? Should you have a plan in place, or do you really need to deal with it as it comes, depending on why they happen to be coming for you that day?
Well, okay, so it's a both and look, I share your disease. I'm an ENTJ, on the Myers-Briggs, so I feel your pain. I really do, and I think there's a difference between having principles that you live your life by and run your business by, and a set of practices for, you have to make a decision on how you're going to react to what you see coming at you. And so and let's be a little more specific, because I don't want to stay up in the clouds for too long. I mean, you're really talking about a brand that gets called out for their affiliation with anything, or for their practices in one way
Anything.
or another.
Somebody sent a tweet 17 years ago. Somebody dressed up like something in their high school yearbook. Some brand, donate. I mean, it doesn't really matter nowadays. I mean, the things that people come
Yeah.
up with are bananas. So we are literally living in a time where, like, this is people's jobs is to find some element to tear people down, which is
Yeah.
really, really unnerving, but it's
Yeah.
reality, and we keep it real here. So this is
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you plan for it?
Yes, I think you have to, and you can't. It's life, right? It's not black and white, because you don't know if the thing you're going to get called out for has any legitimacy behind it. And I think that there is a litmus test when you get called out, and a big part of that is do you apologize, or do you not apologize? Do you respond to the call outs, or do you not respond to the call outs? What I would say is, step one is slow down. You probably don't have to move as fast as you think to. And by the way, I'm dealing with this all day right now. All day, brands are being called out for the way that they are dealing with um, with what has become 2020. But this for the decisions they make, what they put on Instagram to promote their product, the
Right. It
decisions
happens
they've
to be
made
a
as a
day
corporation.
where somebody decided today is a day where we shouldn't be promoting anything, and you promoted something and that was
Yeah.
insensitive. You didn't read the room. Shame
Yeah,
on
yeah.
you.
Brands not advertising on Facebook in July. And so let's say you did advertise on Facebook in July. What is that there for? Look at what that says about you. I mean, I think that evergreen thoughts that I have are like, don't allow someone to tell you what you believe and who you are when they don't know as well as you do. And so all of the if then shaming devices that say, if you do this, or if you don't do this, then you are that, by implication. And people are going to judge your heart and your motives and your decisions based on a rule that they made up. I would say, don't surrender that power on one hand. So if you're feeling that you're under attack, or you see an attack coming toward you, don't assume that the person is completely accurate in the judgments they're pronouncing on you. That's one. But at the same time, let's not be pompous here either. We're human beings, and we live in America, which I still believe is a great country. I think it's the best of a bunch of broken systems, but it's got a lot of problems, and we haven't solved for all the problems we caused at the beginning. There are reasons that people are mad and upset. Voices have gone unheard. We have not had enough compassion or proactivity or plans or proper execution to give everybody a fair shot. That's my belief, and you may not believe that, but I think that people are people, and people are imperfect, and systems of government and systems within corporations are imperfect because they're made of people. And so let's not be so defensive that we can't hear the accusation. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater and go, they went too far in their accusation against me, therefore I'm not going to take time to look at my own, to take inventory of my own decisions. Let's do that, and let's see, can we grow from this? The other person doesn't have to be all right or all wrong. Black and white thinking is poison to everybody. And so I think that, yes, the plan should be, don't assume that what's being said about you is you are that because someone says you are that. Don't feel that just because there's a new gesture that you're being instructed to follow that you have to follow it. It is still your company, it is still your organization, it's still your relationships. You have to figure out the right way you want to live. But because you're a human being, and if you want to grow your business, you have to grow yourself. And if you're somebody that is truly growth oriented, if you have a growth mindset, then you don't know it all. And that person that's agitating you and inconveniencing you by calling you out, they may be illuminating a blind spot for you that's been holding you back in your life and in your relationships and in your business growth. And so I think that it's humility on both sides. You don't surrender your authority and just sign up for whatever protocols get thrown at you. And you don't have to, fall into the, give way to the apology mob, because they're never satisfied. But listen to what they're saying, for heaven's sakes, and have conversations and allow yourself to be accused and be made uncomfortable so that you can find the truth that might be underneath the accusation and grow from the experience.
I think it's very well said. I want to talk a little bit more about this, but I want to take another quick minute to talk about our sponsor. The Roth Effect is brought to you in part by FutureFile. What do you think is the biggest issue when a loved one ages or passes away? Is it dealing with end-of-life tasks, knowing their social media wishes, finding their accounts and passwords, getting family members to agree on important issues? Well, whether it's wishes, information, burden, time, or money, FutureFile has you covered for all of that and more in our easy-to-use kit. From finding important documents like wills and powers of attorney, to emergency contact information and social media wishes, copies of keys, financial account information, medical information, and so much more, FutureFile has it all for one low cost. We're talking under $100. So whether you're a parent, a spouse, an adult child, or even a single individual, FutureFile is a must-have for you and your loved ones. And I fully guarantee you will love it and find it valuable because I created it. Visit futurefile.com today. That's futurefile.com. So Dan, I like your approach, that obviously there's two sides of the spectrum here. There's, the mob side, which is just completely unreasonable, it shouldn't be listened to. You need to go slow, because the reality is that, especially in a mob situation with a company, that they're going to move on to something else and to somebody else in a couple days. And so a lot of times if you just, kind of put your head down and don't say anything, it goes away. But at the same time, you also have to have humility, because in some cases, there may be a kernel of truth, and like everything else, there is that nuance and that gray area there. One thing you didn't discuss, which I wanted to ask you, which I think could be potentially a big issue as well, is how much digging do you need to find or need to do to find out if the people who are agitated are your customers? Because one of the things that I'm seeing a lot on social media with these mobs, with these cancel parties and whatever, is that it's pretty clear that the people who are leading the charge aren't actually the customers of that organization anyway. And so why would you spend all of this time trying to appease these people who were never spending a dollar with you in the first place and probably aren't going to spend a dollar with you no matter what you do?
Yeah. So in the it, I've been going through this with a lot of different media properties for a long time, and it predates my organization. But there used to be blacklists of talent that brands would not associate with, right? And a lot of times it was just based on reputation. But then what started happening is what you started talking about, the social media, the rise of online communities. There's now we have groups like Media Matters and Sleeping Giants who really provide infrastructure to use brands as weapons. And so if they have an agenda that is, supporting a candidate or an ideology, their job is to attack those that would oppose the candidate or the ideology. And they will actually throw marketers, consumer brands in the middle of that by saying, if you advertised on this platform, you therefore are supporting this type of speech. You're supporting these types of ideas. And in fact, look at this soundbite that we have. We have, these 13 words from somebody who talks for 3 hours a day that we found, and therefore they are this and you are that if you support them. It's the if then trap. Now, what you're saying is exactly right. The research has been done. These are usually funded by interested parties, so that there is somebody who is even assigned to antagonize a business. They actually have individuals who they go to work, and their work is to make a lot of noise and simulate outrage that represents people that are not customers and not even necessarily real people.
Wow.
And so that is a real part of what goes on in the media universe. But I will say we're in new territory right now, because what's starting to happen is, if you support a particular podcast, radio show, TV network, um, uh, there are now movements that will actually get millennials or younger contributors to an organization who are, they look, when you're young, you want to make a difference. You want to change the world, right? And you may not see, you might still think issues are black and white, right? And so they start feeling like, hey, how come we're supporting this show that goes against all my political beliefs? And if I'm going to, be a part of this organization that doesn't fall on my side of the issue, now they may not see it that way. They may see it as right and wrong in a fight between good and evil. But they feel that if they are part of an organization, it used to be ping pong tables and snacks in the kitchen that attracted people to organizations, but people want to see mission-led organizations now. There's an expectation of some degree of corporate activism. And so if those values don't line up with your team that works for you, and you start having pressure from inside of the organization, that's very different than agitators who are paid to do this online, because those are voices that are part of your group. And that's very complex. That's very, very difficult. And so call out culture and cancel culture, we do see brands getting caught in the crossfire, and it's doubly hard for them, because they have to look at what are the optics in the marketplace. What does this mean to our stakeholders who don't like thinking that they are aligned with the personalities that our business is aligned with because they do ads for us? So they're thinking about the marketplace optics. They're thinking about the noise that's being made on social media by these third-party organizations. And you're right. This is not about customers by and large, because most of the time, look, we all know the Jordan quote, Republicans buy sneakers too. If you pander to one side or the other, you're going to upset the side that you weren't pandering to. So unless your business has drawn a line in the sand and said, we are for this type of politics, we're against this type of politics, most people don't want to do that. Most people don't feel that's the purpose of their business. And so for those people, you're not going to satisfy anybody by going too far to the right or to the left. But my hope is that your values as a brand are what matter. And when I go on when I go on your show, Carol, and I'm advertising a product, you're introducing me to your friends, and I'm going to be able to share my values, my brand strategy, my opportunity for those customers, those potential customers, the marketplace. I'm going to be able to influence them in a way that I feel good about. I'm not going there because I'm trying to subscribe to your politics, right? And so there's a real confusion there. And I do think that just having more conversations about what do you think is happening? Are we influencing the audience, or is the personality influencing our values as an organization? And if you sign up for your campaign on the Rush Limbaugh show, and all of a sudden, because you're on that show, you're now putting his political views on your website. Okay, well, maybe you're being influenced by that show, and you have to decide, what is that the organization that you want to promote? But usually that's got nothing to do with what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And brand values are expressed through the way you treat your customers. And so I think it's the opposite of that assumption. It's a false assumption. And the truth is, you are trying to reach people and help them in their lives. And hopefully you're not going to discriminate because they do or don't share your political viewpoint.
Amen to that. Thank you. Getting back, because I would be remiss to not ask you this when we have all these small business owners, coming back to your expertise in podcast advertising. For the small business owner listener who's listening to this right now, and they want to get started with podcasts, how do they do it? Because I think that's one of the things that seems scary. When you're trying a new medium, you're not really sure how to get started. Like, what's the best way for them to test out advertising on podcasts and see if that's something that works for them?
So, I think depending on where the size of the business is, if I'm a local business, I may want to look at regional content, because podcast really, I think, is not yet at the point where they've hit critical mass in listenership in local regions. And so I think, generally you have to have something that is a national offering most of the time. Otherwise, I think there are other ways to align with somebody that can operate in your service area. But if you have something that's national and you're doing it for the first time, the first thing anybody does, whether it's our ad agency at Oxford Road or whether it is, what I would tell any small business owner to do, is listen to the show and listen to the ads and see who's advertising in it, and see if brands that look like your brand or are likely reaching the same type of customers. It doesn't mean that they're in the same category. They shouldn't be. But, there are lookalike brands. And so ask yourself, do I hear these people using these promo codes and these vanity URLs? Do I hear them advertising on Carol's show? And are they like me? And if they are, and I only have enough budget to kind of dip my toe in, I might reach out to your program directly and go, hey, look, can you set me up on the type of program that they have? Because the truth is that, forget what all the psychographics and demographics say. It's about your relationship with the audience. And if you can get them to consider X product, they will probably consider Y product as well. Now, if you've got a real budget and you are thinking that you might be able to do this at 6 figures, 7 figures a month in advertising budget, you probably need an agency. There aren't that many organizations that really specialize in this, even though every American has a podcast now. There's only a few agencies that really know how to scale a business in it. I would offer you to reach out to our group, Oxford Road, because this is an area of specialization for us, and just go to oxfordroad.com. I don't know if you were
Perfect.
teeing me up for a plug or if I just forced
No,
that in there. But
listen, we are a capitalist podcast, and therefore plugs are welcome and available. Switching gears, though, we do have a final segment here at the Roth Effect called Now You Know, where you get to teach the audience something new. And not that you haven't taught us a lot new already, we just happen to be greedy. So, Dan, what are we learning in our Now You Know segment?
Okay, so one piece of trivia that I think we should be thinking about over the summer as we celebrate our independence is that Independence Day actually did not happen on July 4th. It was actually July 2nd that Congress voted to free us from British rule. And the 4th is when John Hancock signed the Declaration of Independence. And so that's the day that we harp on. All that is to say, we don't have to limit our celebration of what we set out to do with this country to one day on the calendar. I think that this can be a much longer celebration, and I think it is as important now as ever to not look at so hard at just what we've done wrong, although we have to acknowledge it. I think we have to look at what is our goal as a country, and how through our businesses can we help get more perfect in fulfilling that promise, in having a land that truly provides an opportunity for all and a level playing field to the extent that we can make it. I think that this is a real time for us as a nation, and an entrepreneurial one, to take a minute and think about the promises we made on paper well before we were born, but have helped us to get to where we are today, and figure out how do we get even better in the next phase. Because I think we all have a lot of opportunity to grow, and if there was ever a season to look at that, the good, bad, and the ugly, now's the time to do it, so we can all make a better way for ourselves going forward.
All right. Well, if you didn't know that you could celebrate Independence Day over at least 3 days, I would argue every day, because individual rights and freedom are worth celebrating every day. Now you know. Dan, this has been a fantastic discussion. I want to make sure that everybody's connected with you and all the different things that you do. So we're just going to plug. So Oxford Road, if you have a big budget, want an ad agency that specializes in podcasts, or just want to reach out to Dan, where's the best way to connect with Oxford Road?
So go to oxfordroad.com, and look, regardless of your budget, we do create some free resources for marketers and people that are in the business of communicating and persuading. And so sign up for our newsletter, which is called The Influencer. Every week we curate deals that are available in the marketplace. We curate the news, and we usually have thought leadership piece that tells you our view on what's going on right now and what you need to know. As an extension of that, we actually launched our own podcast, just like every American, in the last few months, to help brands struggle with COVID, and how do you operate in that environment as a brand, as a marketer. We are pivoting that now. It's called Oxford Road Presents Media's New Deal. If you just look on anywhere you get your podcasts or YouTube for Oxford Road Presents, you'll find it. But what we're really starting to shift toward now is how do you market toward a divided nation? Because we're going to be dealing with this all year, at least, right? And it's really, really important. The types of conversations that you and I are having here, that's what we're trying to solve for. And so we have some great people. We've got, I had Adam Carolla on, with his perspective as somebody who's friends with Tucker Carlson and Jimmy Kimmel. And how did you do that? We have DeRay McKesson, who's one of the most prominent figures in the Black Lives Matter movement and also hosts Pod Save the People. We're going to be talking to him next week. So there's a lot that's happening, and the world is changing really fast. And what we're trying to do is create a platform to hear from all sides of an issue and have better conversations about it, and really try to hear each other first, because that's the most important thing. Wow. And then the last initiative I just want to tell you guys about that we're doing is, so much of what we're dealing with, I think, is a byproduct of voices that are going unheard, and there is also a persistent problem across the world of voices that go unheard and needs unmet in children's hospitals, where you have kids who are stuck in bed and don't have parents that are able to be bedside 24/7, nor are there enough nurses to do it. So I experienced this when my daughter was born. My youngest daughter was in Children's Hospital for 6 months, and we saw how heartbreaking it is when you look around you and you see these kids crying and there's nobody there to hold them. So we created something called the Koala Corps, which is simply a conduit. It is just, if you go to koalacorps.com, KOLACORPS.com, you'll see a little bit about our story, but what we're using it as is a platform to direct funds directly to Children's Hospital, to hire program administrators, to schedule, to train, to vet, to do all that. Because there are enough people that want to volunteer. There are babies that need help. There's nobody in the middle. And so we're trying to solve that problem. So anybody that can support that cause today, we need all the help we can get. It's
That's
very
a
important.
fantastic cause. Koala Corps, will put that obviously in the show notes. And I mean, honestly, with all the things that are going on, what a great thing to volunteer for, to be able to hold some babies and give some love. That sounds fantastic. Well done.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for being here. That does it for this episode of The Roth Effect. Obviously, I love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment at Ricochet, tweet to me at CarolJSRoth. Of course, subscribe at Ricochet, iTunes, wherever you download your fine podcasts, and never miss an episode of The Roth Effect.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.